All right, we'll call to order the Municipal Assembly Audit Committee. It's about 1:01 on the 31st of October. President's Assembly, we've got Assemblyman Riviera and Dyson. And we have 3 items on the audit today. The Anchorage Library, the Port of Anchorage, and ML&P. ML&P is asked to be last on the agenda because of a conflict. Sir.
Oh, just a point of order that I'm also a member of the audit committee.
Oh my goodness, all right.
Yeah, so when you're looking for quorum and those sorts of things, I can
All right,
serve some marginal purpose there.
all right. And Mr. Chadwick from the, who heads up the audit department, and Rose Foley from the Assembly office. All right, so any objection to the agenda as presented to us? Thanks, Rose. All right. Ms. Chad, would you like to speak in general about the audits?
Sure. We'll start with the library audit.
Okay.
And in this audit report, we had 5 findings and recommendations regarding library donations. Management was responsive to all 5 audit recommendations. Our first finding was donations made to the library were not recorded on log and were received by library staff. We had a second finding on page 3 where there was no written agreement between the municipality and the foundation authorizing the municipality to provide employee labor and resources to support the foundation's activities. Our third finding on page 4 was materials ordered for Friends of the Library, where we found municipal employees sometimes order materials for the Friends of the Library using donation funds. Finding 4, we had over $14,000 in donated funds not been appropriated at the time of the audit. And finding 5 was there was a lack of segregation of duties regarding controls over the processing of donations received by the library for the foundation.
All right. Am I right in assuming you ladies are from the library? Please come up to the table and join us. Introduce yourselves.
We are in costume for Halloween. For the record, this is not my normal dress.
I'm sorry.
We're in costume for Halloween.
I work in the library and I'm the library, so we apologize for our goofy appearances.
I'm Claire Ross. I'm with the Office of Economic and Community Development, and I help Mary Jo, the library director, with long-term planning and development, and she and the assistant director are both out of town, so I'm here to represent them.
And I'm Audrey Jo Malone. I'm the junior administrative officer in the administration department with Mary Jo and Virginia being out of town. I'm here to represent as well.
So 100 years ago, I was on the library board.
Yeah.
I think my name's on a plaque over there somewhere. Where is that gone to?
I can't remember. I've seen it somewhere, but I can't remember where it was.
Yeah, it used to be right in the main entry there.
Yeah.
I don't blame them for wanting to relegate me to a back corner somewhere. All right. So why did you all, the library, end up with these suboptimal performance on the things that the audit showed up?
We have a lot of moving parts, and a number of we're just grateful for the audit committee for finding these things and helping us clean up our procedures. We have a lot of moving parts at the library, and some of these things are just things that we've been wanting to do, but it slipped through the cracks.
Yeah, so you're overworked, lots of volunteers and turnover, and you get the main things done, and a lot of this stuff that for you is on the periphery slides.
Right. Or things that we don't do a lot. Like, we don't get very many people wanting to make donations at the desks. Most of them know to give to the Friends or the Foundation directly. So it only happens every now and then. And we don't have people trained on it. And then we don't think to make procedures because it's another couple months.
Yeah, so one problem is ignorance, not even knowing that these are required, which is understandable. And another one is not enough attention paid to it. Somebody saying, hey, look, this has got to get done. And the third one I'm particularly interested in is, are any of the requirements stupid and counterproductive that need to be changed?
No, I think all of the recommendations are pretty reasonable. They're all things that we're already working on and have plans to do.
Yeah. So I asked Mr. Chadwick if there is the lack of doing these things well compromises at all the nonprofits' tax exempt status.
Well, both nonprofits, they file their own 990s and they have their own accountants and financial procedures and manuals. So these parts of it are just on the very periphery of what those groups do.
Yeah, and I'm not meaning to be nitpicking, but if indeed the city gave them $14,000 worth of employee time, you could argue that was a donation in kind that didn't show up on their books.
Right. We need to have that memorandum of understanding. It's critical that the Friends and the Foundation exist because neither one of them have staff.
Yep.
And so everything they raise, most of it's able to go back to the library. So if we complicate it too much, then they'll have to spend more money on their auditing and less to the library.
Yep.
But it's completely sensible to have a memorandum of understanding. It's something we've been needing to do for ages, and when we get busy, it's been slipping through the cracks. So now this is brought it to the forefront, and we're going to get that completed.
Yeah, and registering and tracking of the donations.
So all of the donations to the Friends and Foundation are registered and tracked very carefully.
By
It's
them?
Yes, yeah. It's just these few that come. Sometimes someone will come to the front desk and want to make a donation, and they don't care. They don't know if there's Friends or Foundation. They don't know the difference. They just want to donate to the library.
Yep.
And so they'll give usually cash, I think, and usually it's like $5. They're paying off a fine with $20, and they say give the other $5 to the library.
Sure.
So it's pretty small change, not to take it lightly, but it's pretty small change, and so we just need to have some procedures. But the Friends and the Foundation, everything to them gets tracked very carefully.
Good. And I assume they send out tax deductible receipts.
Yep.
Do you guys, or does anybody who makes these donations even ask for it?
That's one thing that we haven't done that I wanted to do for a long time, because even if someone donates $2, they should still get a thank you letter and receipt. So that's one of the procedures that we're going to start, is if they donate to the library, that they get a receipt and that they fill out proper paperwork to go with that donation, even if it's $2.
Mr. Riviera, do you have any questions?
I do. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So unlike the chair, 100 years ago, I did not have the privilege of serving on the library board. So just a quick question on the relationship. Sounds like there are three parties here: the Friends of the Library Foundation, and the department. Could you just quickly go through the first two, what their primary goal is, and then how they all function together?
The Library Foundation raises money for capital projects and bigger, more long-term. So they accept, when people pass away, they accept bequests and larger gifts. And so they help raise millions of dollars to the Mountain View, Eagle River, Gerwood Library renovations, the Woodstock Library renovation. They also get large grants for programs if the library wants to try a new project, and it's not, if we're testing something out and it's not really responsible to use taxpayer dollars to experiment, we'll get nonprofits and businesses and private individuals to donate, and then the library can spend that money for a trial. If it's worthwhile, then we can move it into the library program and use municipal funding for that. The Friends do more day-to-day. The Friends are kind of like the food bank. They're just trying to keep the shelves stocked, and they're not looking at long-range policies on hunger. So they raise between $80,000 to $120,000 a year, and that goes to buy new materials. It funds all of our summer reading programs, and then they buy special things, like it came up in here. At the desk, we get asked a lot for earbuds or USB drives for our computers. So they supply little things like that.
Okay. All right. And then just one quick follow-up question. So one of the findings in here suggested that there be a primary and a secondary in charge of accounting and handling donations. Does that also, is that just for the department, or does that include the foundation and friends?
That would just, so we do have one staff member who checks the foundation mailboxes and processes the checks. So now we'll have 2 people working on that process.
Okay.
But I mean, that's pretty common city policy. It's a very uncommon nonprofit policy because nonprofits don't have that kind of staff to have 2 people doing functions.
Right.
I've worked in nonprofits for almost 20 years, and I've never seen that in a nonprofit. But since it is a city function, we'll do it for that portion of it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I'm sorry, would you repeat for me your question that you just asked?
Yeah, so it was just regarding one of the findings in here was that there should be for the department a primary and a secondary for intake of donations and proper accounting and logging of donations.
Does that mean a 2-step process?
Segregation of control.
Yeah, there we go. That's the official.
To segregate the controls. Instead of having one person doing everything, you have 2 people involved.
Okay.
So that controls are segregated a little bit. So not one person is receiving all the money, depositing all the money, reconciling everything, but you have at least a couple people involved. And that's what she's saying. There's a primary and secondary person.
All right. Yeah, so it keeps somebody from having their hand to till.
Yes.
Never happened to a librarian. Has anybody ever met a straighter group of people? All right. Anything else, Mr. Harris? Anything else for this?
No, I appreciated your comment, Mr. Chairman, about are there things in here that we shouldn't do to make it easier for the library to operate more efficiently and more effectively? And I think, this is an example of in essence, a public/private partnership where we have certain things that we made available to the library, and then there are people and volunteers from the community who are stepping in to do some things we couldn't do, but that really enhance the experience of the library. So, I would say that if, speaking from the standpoint of the administration, that if there are things that we can do to help you operate more efficiently and more effectively, please don't hesitate to bring them up, because one of the things I think, for example, that I saw here is, we have a rule that the Assembly has a rule. Actually, there's a rule here about appropriation requests done quarterly. And I believe that's, if I understand the process, that's generally either an item on the consent agenda, for example. Maybe there's, as we move into this great world of SAP, maybe an easier way to do that. But certainly, I understand the Assembly's desire to be involved in the whole process of recognizing when a donation has happened, and provides us as well an opportunity to give thanks publicly for when those donations happen. But maybe there's some things we can do more effectively, and please let us know what those are.
I really appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
So, not to be nasty, but could you have these agreements in place in 90 days?
Yes, we. It somewhat depends on the Friends and Foundation timetable, but it's something that we're working to have done by the end of the year, at least the major workings of it, and then have it signed maybe shortly into January.
Is that unreasonable?
I don't think so.
All right, if it is, it needs to slip, let me know.
Okay.
And we can do that. And you might also just add a few words on each of these points. You can say, all right, Mike said, we agreed, here's what we've done, and hopefully get that flanged up by January sometime.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable.
All right, and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for the work you do. And to the degree it's valid, thanks on behalf of the community.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Mr. Ruffalo.
We gotta get back to the kiddos.
Thank you.
Come and join us, please. Next up, we'll take up on Port of Anchorage. Would you, Mike, give us a summary of what you found, please?
Yes.
In this report, we had 2 audit findings. The first audit finding, and management was responsible to both audit findings. The first audit finding, we found that Matson did not pay wharfage for non-revenue cargo. And according to Matson, non-revenue cargo included items such as supplies for company business and employee relocation shipments. Our second finding was tote did not always report each ton of cargo, and this had to deal with Alpar loads that tote did not report as, they did not report the Alpar loads and company business cargo on its tonnage report submitted to the port.
Explain what Alpar is, please.
Alpar is a nonprofit that deals with recyclable goods. And I forget what exactly the acronym.
You know,
they got rid of the acronym and they just called themselves Alpar.
They're Alpar now, yeah, because nobody remembers what it stands for, and you really have to look it up. I think I even
Alaska
Googled
Litter
it.
Prevention and Recovery, right? Alpar.
Yeah.
That sounds right.
You
That sounds pretty
can
good.
make something up.
That sounds pretty good.
He's smarter than almost all of us.
Yeah.
I was just
Well, let's
around
call
back
it
in
that.
the day.
So those were the 2 findings, and yes, Alaska for Literature Prevention and Recycling. Yes. So,
All right.
yeah.
All right. So, would you explain a little better than Mike did? What are the non-revenue things that go across the dock?
Sure, and I should probably state my name for the record too. Right? I'm Steve Rebuffo, I'm the director of the Port of Anchorage.
Sorry.
I too am dressed for Halloween. I thought I'd be a port director today. We'll see how that goes over. There are a couple of different categories of types of things that fall into what we call non-revenue cargo. And it's an agreement we come to with the ocean carriers in this particular instance, where we capture the identification of those things for which they don't make any revenue when they're backhauling. Alpar is probably a really good example. I mean, they, as a courtesy to the community, offer that service, and they backhaul all those recyclable materials in containers that would otherwise go back empty, and they don't charge Alpar for that service. So we never felt that we ought to charge that particular carrier for something they're not making any money off of. A little bit different with Matson. Matson doesn't have the Alpar. They don't have the Alpar contract, if you will, but they also haul back the items that are part of what gets disassembled when a container is delivered to a user. It's the empty wooden pallets, the banding material and the wrapping material that holds the pallets in place. For the bakery type customers, there are huge racks that they put all the packaged baked goods on. I mean, they don't leave that there, or they leave it there, but when they take the containers back after a follow-on delivery, the empty ones they take back with them and haul back down to the lower 48 and go back to their customers to refill and send back up again. So anything that falls into that category, they use the term dunnage. The first time I've seen this arbitrative.
Arbitrative is a term that Matson used.
Yeah,
And we weren't sure exactly what that meant.
And I will tell you from my dealings with them, I think it's a grown-up term for dunnage. Dunnage was the term we came to agreement with back when it was Horizon Lines. And the last time we did one of these PUA audits, it was tote and Horizon Lines. And this is the first time that Matson's been exposed to one of these, and they've really been the port's customer for a little over 2.5 years now. So this is a first for them. The faces are all the same, but the corporate home office is different. So they fell into the new corporate culture and the new names of things, and we are adjusting to a lot of that right now. I hope I answered your question.
You did fine. So Mike and I were really struggling to figure out what that term meant.
I appreciate it.
And you did too.
Well, yeah, because it sure doesn't sound as clean as dunnage does it?
Well,
Yeah.
And I certainly do converse with Kenny Gill, who is the Senior Vice President for Alaska Operations and who lives at the Port of Alaska now. He and I confer on these things. In fact, when the audit came out, I sent him our concerns, assuming that at one point I'd be asked to explain a few things to the
All right,
committee.
I got it.
And they were good.
Yeah. So when, well, probably before your time, but when the port decides that like Alpar stuff can go across our dock with no charge, it's kind of our in-kind contribution to a good cause.
Yes.
Who makes that decision?
The port director will make that decision.
All right. I would like for the assembly to be notified when another category
Fair enough?
of, in essence, charitable donation we the city are making.
Okay. Yeah, and back when all this began, there was no enterprise utility
Sure.
assembly committee that kind of kept an eye on enterprises and utilities, but there is now, and that's an easily reported item at one of
Sure.
those meetings.
And who knows, Ethan might want to know too.
But I share everything with my boss, who's the municipal manager.
All right.
Because when I make a decision, and he knows.
Yeah. Mr. Chadwick.
Yeah, Mr. Dyson, the port might want to consider clarifying that in the PUA.
And I've been talking about that with Kenny Gill. We may have to modify the PUA to make more clear some of these items, especially if we're dealing with a new company with a new business philosophy that is less accepting of those general language than we've had in the past and gotten away with. I appreciate that.
And I understood from our previous conversation that you think you're on track to get the information you need from Matson.
Yeah, we monthly get their reports so that we can calculate what their wharfage payment would be. And maybe this is off the topic, but the way we do wharfage, the way we charge wharfage to the PUA holders is what they're paying this year is based on what their tonnage was last year. So we inform them late December, early January, after we've seen what the total tonnage was for a particular year, and we multiply it by the rate. We tell them that this is your monthly payment for the next year, so they have a predictable charge they know we're going to pay.
Yeah.
So we would do something like this at the same time we're doing that.
All right. Just curious, what has been the trend of the amount of cargo going across your dock the last 3 years?
It's been down a little bit.
How much?
3, 4, 5 percentage points
Per year?
per year.
What do you anticipate for the next 3 years?
That it's going to stay relatively flat. I think, the fact that the oil and gas industry came down their presence here, and we provided a lot of subsistence-like support to the populations on the North Slope. All the cargo came in here and got delivered up there by truck. Now that they've sort of established the new baseline for themselves, what we expect to see, excuse me, will be more predictable. I don't think we're going to see those, 2, 3, 4, 5% drops. I think it'll stay relatively flat going forward. Interestingly enough, though, on the petroleum side, it's been going up. Yeah, so there's something happening on the petroleum side of things. It used to be, years and years and years, it was the ocean carriers, the Matsons and the Totes, who were the big man on campus.
Yep.
Down at the port. Now the petroleum users are bringing in more tonnage than they are.
So probably within that period, another thing happened that we have no control of, and that's scrap steel. And there used to be quite a bit go out of our port here.
Yeah.
Nothing's moving.
We don't see scrap anymore.
Yep.
I think they get a really good rate from the barge operators down there at Ship Creek. And personal note, I would much rather that junk be piled up down on their property.
Yeah. But you see any down there?
I'm sorry?
Do you see any down there?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
Because I was
see
heard that
crushed
there's
cars
nothing
being
moving in the
delivered.
world.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
a summertime thing. I
Yeah.
think it builds up over the year, and then in the summer they ship it all
All right, Mr. Riviere, a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I noticed that both of these findings were ones that were previously reported by internal audit in 2008.
out. Yeah.
And so I just want to know what's changed between 2008 and 2017. And I certainly hope that if I'm still on this committee in 2026 that we don't have this same audit.
Yeah, and if I'm the port director in 2026, I'm hoping it's not the same. I think we've not done a very good job of qualifying for the audit folks what that definition is of revenue cargo and non-revenue cargo. And I hope we cleared that up this time, and that won't be a finding the next time. We are very comfortable with what we charge them for and what we don't, and that we're getting a good return on what it is we expected for what's coming across the dock. If this solves the semantics problem, then I think we'll be good to go. If we do this again in 10 years.
Okay, and so that's how you would clarify what the audit findings were basically semantics issues?
I still think we were struggling to get, what the acceptable terms were and what it's fair to charge for and what is fair not to.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Chadwick?
Mr. Rivera, through the chair, that's why I was saying in the PUA, if those could be clarified in the PUA, I think that would help a lot.
I agree.
Mr. Harris?
No, Mr. Chairman, no questions.
Rose? All right, thank you. We'll move on to ML&P. Please introduce yourself for the record.
Mark Johnston, General Manager, ML&P.
Molly Morrison, CFO of ML.
Mr. Chadwick?
Okay. We had 3 audit findings related to this audit of Bradley Lake operation and maintenance costs. Management was responsive to all the findings to the extent that they could be responsive.
Could you provide a copy of this? I sent it to Barbara.
We have some copies.
Okay.
If I know
Yeah.
Mr. Dyson has one.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure I brought some additional ones if we need them. Sorry
I
for
have.
the interruption.
I made sure she made some copies just in case. ML&P was responsive to the extent that they could be responsive because they are working with the Bradley Lake Project Management Committee and they need to run these things through the committee and can't just act all by themselves. Our first finding dealt with aviation services contract not effectively utilized. We found that hourly charges for flights using their Cessna airplane were charged to the project, but many of the flights did not occur. And we had another finding where we found some questionable costs, air transportation for 7 flights that appeared questionable. We found some food purchases and some training expenditures, and then untimely invoicing where the CEA did not submit the invoices to AA in the required time period. Those were our 3 findings. Homer Electric did provide a response to these findings. This was yesterday.
Yes.
And that was provided to you just now. So those were our findings.
All right, thank you. Hey, Mike. Mark, I assume you've seen this.
I have.
Yeah. So that seemed a couple of contradictory lines in here that Mr. Chadwick found, but one of the sentences seemed to say it's very important that they have an airplane ready anytime. And another sentence says it's not that imperative to have it right away.
Mr. Chair, I think the difficulty is that Homer Electric uses the same service for Homer Electric. Homer Electric is also the operator for Bradley Lake through the BPMC. And so the operator provides the service to both. For Homer Electric, it's not necessarily as imperative that they have access to the airplane. For Bradley Lake, it is, because absent getting a boat and there's not a boat over there. You have to take a boat over and bring it back. And if there are emergency situations, whether it be an injury or something like that, the plane, you need to have the plane available to fly and address those emergencies when they happen.
That explains kind of the apparent contradiction.
And in talking with Mr. Janorski, who happens to be the general manager of Homer, but is also currently the chair of the Bradley Lake Project Management Committee, he has said that in 18, they're going to bid the contract, but they'll bid it as two separate contracts. And so there will be a separate contract for Homer and then a separate contract for the BPMC.
Certainly nothing that I know about or Mike did that anybody was pocketing money or was an insider deal.
No, and
Where somebody's brother-in-law got fixed some contract.
And it was a competitive contract. The problem was there was only one contractor that bid on it. And as such, they were able to somewhat set the terms because it was a service that was definitely needed for the operation of the project. And they did it as a take or pay or a fixed price contract, a guarantee that we would utilize it to a certain extent. And so if you don't fly, you still pay.
Sure.
And so the difficulty was that because it was all together and they thought that between Homer and the project, we would use the number of flights, that did not happen. And so Homer came to the BPMC last year and they said, you know, we're going to end the year and we have been subsidizing the project we paid for the flights even though the project should pay for some of them. It was considered by all 7 members of the Bradley Lake Project Committee, which is Homer, Seward, Chugach, MLG, MEA, Golden Valley, and AEA. We reviewed it, they provided us the information, and in one of our meetings, we agreed to the payment or the charge that they gave to us.
Sure. So, Mark, it also talks about here the food purchases and training, so on. What are the lengths of hitches the guys pulled out at the plant?
Mr. Chair, I believe that they are a week on, a week off.
Okay.
There is a bunkhouse, and it has living facilities, it has kitchen facilities.
Yep.
But they are required during their hitch to bring their own food over. The project does not pay for their food. In this particular instance, with some of the items that Mr. Chadwick found, some of those, there was an individual that is not assigned to the project that was over there because in 2016 we were doing a fish water restoration because the gates had been clogged, and so what we were required to do, and we were going to do it 2 years ago, and the water didn't make it to where we needed it to be because we had to draw the lake way down in order to make it so that people and equipment could get in there and fix it. We did it in 16, and one of the individuals actually stayed over there for an extended period of time, and in that particular instance, he was reimbursed for the food that he provided while he was there.
All right. Is that a satisfactory answer, Mike?
That's an answer. The individual that we're talking about, was he an employee of the project then?
No, he is an employee of Homer Electric.
Oh.
There are, I believe, 6 employees of the projects. They also, in some cases, happen to be Homer Electric employees, but they are stationed there. They are assigned to the project, and they work over there full-time. There are individuals within Homer that may allocate a portion of their time, but their job is actually at the utility, and they do many other things. They just happen to oversee the project. And in this particular instance, this individual was the project manager for that fish tunnel restoration project.
And you wanted him to eat.
I'm sure that he wanted to. You know, I would have been okay if he didn't eat, you know, but he wanted to.
All right. All right. Mr. Riviere?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, since the last 2 presenters had to deal with this subject, are you all in Halloween costumes?
I am
Okay.
dressed up as the general manager of ML&P.
Great, fantastic. So serious questions. So it appears that specifically in HEA, their response in the air transportation section, that there is a tension between the work rule and the labor agreement. And perhaps I'm a neophyte in this area, but which one wins in that case when there is such a tension, and how is that resolved?
Well, and I don't know that I would suggest that it's a tension, because I believe the labor rules say that it's space available. And so we will provide flights over, and I believe it's 2 days a week, so that they move people and supplies over. If there are seats available, the labor contract says that they can move dependents on a seat available basis.
Okay.
And so what that allows them to do, if the flight's gonna go and there's a seat, they can put somebody in it. If the flight is full and they want it to go over, they either have to wait or they have to pay for their own transportation to get them over to the project.
Okay. So obviously, unlike the last two presenters, the assembly and the administration don't have really direct control over this. It's done by the committee. What's the process if, let's say, our internal audit is not satisfied with these responses and goes back? What's the process to deal with this through the committee?
The committee meets generally once a month. It may be more frequently than that. And the 6 or the 7 committee members have a representative and an alternate, and it happens to be at the AEA boardroom off of Arctic and Northern Lights. And if internal audit was not satisfied with the response, then they could certainly come and present their questions to the committee and have the committee address those questions. One of the things that I will say, and I appreciate Mr. Chadwick's recognition that we were as cooperative as we could be, but we don't necessarily control all of the documents related to this. What we did discuss with him is that as this process goes through, that the budget is presented to the 7 committee members. It is reviewed in detail at a meeting. You then have a 30-day window in which to ask questions and get additional information on the budget. It is then approved by the committee. And I believe in the case of the budget, it requires an affirmative vote of AEA. There are certain things that are just a majority. There are other things that require affirmative vote of AEA because they're obviously owner of the project. And as we get monthly and quarterly information from the AEA when they do the billings, the information from Homer as the operator, and Chugach does some of the work on some of the transmission lines, and that's why they bill. Those costs come in, and those are then billed out to each of the respective owners on a monthly basis. We have the opportunity to ask for additional information, review that, ask questions, say, hey, wait a second, I think this is wrong, and bring that before the committee. And then any time that we get an operator's report every month that goes into all of the activities that are ongoing, any projects, any capital projects, and reports specific to that. They usually provide pictures and other things, because unless you're actually there and looking at it, you don't necessarily know what they're talking about. And we have the opportunity to question anything at that point. If they are going to overspend a budget item, or they have, like with the charter service, if they have an issue that they believe they need to bring to the committee, whether it's AEA or the operator, they will bring it to the committee, discuss it, and then the committee has the final determination as to whether or not they're going to accept it or adjust the budget. And so in the event, for instance, in 2016, there was a training program that we were going to put together for some of the folks over there. What we found is that, and this was the operator that came back to us and said, you can do this, you can spend the money, but you don't necessarily have the time, because of projects that are ongoing, to send the people, so you're wasting your money. So we would suggest that you just not spend it. And the committee considered it and said, okay, fine, then you can bring it back at some future date. So I think that there's a lot of involvement from the 7 parties, and I will tell you that the 7 parties seldom ever agree unanimously on anything. But if the assembly was not, through Mr. Chadwick was not satisfied with the responses that have been received, then we, as a member, could, bring him. It's open to the public. He can come on his own, and he could bring the items before the committee, and the committee would review his concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, at least as I understand it from Mr. Chadwick, in essence, his report and investigation is a service to you guys to do what you want with it. Correct?
It is, Mr. Chair. We generally will request from time to time, and I believe it's every 2 to 3 years, that his folks go out and take a look at it. Not that we anticipate that we're going to find a huge smoking gun, but just to make sure that they are following the rules,
Yep.
because we look at it at a much higher level.
Yeah. All right, so I don't, any other questions, Mr. Harris?
No, sir.
Yeah, so I don't anticipate any further action from us, and I don't see what the things that Mr. Chadwick reported are of any great significance given the circumstances you've explained it. Do they run that machine base loaded?
They do not. The storage capacity of the hydro, in fact, there was an article in one of the newspapers, I believe it was the Peninsula newspaper, that if they ran it base loaded, it would run for about 3 or 4 months and it would run out of water. And so it is used more as a peaking unit,
Yeah,
and used to provide regulation to the system.
yeah, that's what Tony uses, including the lake one, he tells me.
Yes. The one issue that Mr. Chadwick noted that is not addressed in the Homer report because it is Chugach with the late billings, as we discussed with Mr. Chadwick, we're not overly concerned by that because the longer that it takes to bill, the longer we hold our money. But because we do have the opportunity to deal with Chugach on other things, SPP mainly, we note that they are sometimes a little behind in billing in a timely manner.
I understand exactly what you just said, Mr. Harris.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, in terms of, will the response from Homer Electric be incorporated into the audit report or provided to the Assembly to sort of clarify or answer some of the questions that were still sort of seem like they were still pending in the audit report?
It will not be added to the audit report, but the response was provided to the Assembly.
Okay.
Or
It was provided to the clerk, we can get that.
project
to the
president,
Assembly.
private assembly.
And I will say that I did have a couple of the Assembly members that asked if they would have an opportunity to see the Homer response, so I would request, if possible, that it be given to all the Assembly members so they're at least aware of it.
We'll do that.
All right, thank you. And I hope it goes without saying, but if there's anything we can do to make your job easier, including correcting dumb things we've done in the past, let us know.
I appreciate that, sir.
All right, thank you. Y'all state, go ahead, Mr. Harris. Oh, well, I was just over at, you guys are free to go.
Okay.
We're on a different matter.
Thank you.
Planning and permitting. And before Mr. Riviera and I got here, the Assembly did something that certainly should have been good, and that allows licensed architects and engineers to sign off on plans and so on, and which should be streamlining the project process. But when I was visiting with those guys, I don't think I'm talking out of church. They said that there's several of the professional engineers, architects, who don't have the experience that they really need to do a good job. And so they've been kind of bringing those guys in and explaining, you know, how the job needs to be better and so on and so forth. But there's some pattern to it. And they ask about the possibility of an audit.
Okay.
And I didn't understand that they were asking our audit committee to do it, but it is literally an audit of professional performance. As I'm sure you've seen in your extensive background, every profession, including mine as an engineer, it's really tough to get people to report on the bad actors
Yep.
in their profession. And so it is a issue, and I guess I'm saying to you, you all on the committee, to put that on the back burner and I'll pay attention and see what's going on. But it just might be an issue. All right, anything else, sir?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just before we go, I just wanted to recognize that we've been joined by the Controller, Tammy Clayton, who I believe is also a member of the Audit Committee. So
Oh, Tammy.
Tammy had
Sorry.
joined us. I think she was getting in a little late today or something from the roads or something from driving up north toward past Eagle River where they have all of the good stuff in Eagle River. So anyway, just wanted to recognize
Yeah,
Tammy.
and forgive me for not recognizing you.
Do we need to, as a committee, approve or send these to the assembly, or they just, as part of the normal process, they just
All right.
help?
Do any of you think that we need any further action aside from what we've asked the library to do?
Mr. Chair, I would suggest that perhaps during the committee reports, you report that we reviewed these.
Yes.
And would suggest the assembly accept them. But it's in the consent agenda, if I understand.
Yep.
For the next meeting.
Yeah, thanks for
Yeah.
reminding me.
Thank you.
Any additional business?
Just that the internal audit division often sends out a request for, or notification request for audit topics
Yep.
to the assembly members.
And we'll be sending that request actually this week.
Yeah.
Um,
And I'll try to remember the assembly. I'm interested in us being aggressive, but only when we hear from whatever source there might be a monster lurking out there in the bushes somewhere that we want you to go find, drag it out by its ear.
We can do that. That request, we just talked about that last week, and we were planning to send that out actually tomorrow, so November
Yep.
1st.
Good
And
timing.
Mr. Riviere, it'd be interest to you. I have some anecdotal information about some of the social services providers that perhaps we're not being as ethical as they should. Come to find out, they're almost all state money, you know. And
That's very true.
pardon?
That's very true, Mr. Chair. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not appropriate for us. I have clarified with Mr. Chadwick that anywhere city money goes, even to contract providers, you know, he has the authority to go and look after this city's people's money, you know, out there. So I don't want to make work, I don't want to cause people problems, but I want to go find the stinky, dirty things in the corners if they're out there. My guess is Mr. Chadwick's got a good nose for that. So, all right, we're adjourned.